Hello, everyone. Hello, everyone. Welcome to tonight's episode. I cannot speak as loud as other episodes, but hopefully my voice comes across well. Um, the title of tonight's episode is Living Many Lifetimes in a Momentary Motion. And before the title, in some sense, could have sense to the viewer, I have to kind of explain how that sentence arose in my attention. Every human being enters this world through a birth, a physical birth. Now, we don't know what's before and we don't know what's after the lifetime, but we enter the system of life through a birthing process. This birthing process experientially is like an awakening. But to all those people outside of you physically, just your parents, as you know, everybody, your family members, you who are being born, it's as if there is something physical to acknowledge. And there's this ancient thought that it's as if there was first a sort of collective eternal being. This collective attributeless eternal being, for eons, it was just the kind of dormant energy, conscious energy, you know, without an attribute. And what I'm trying to say, it's as if an eternal being born to some may be felt as a tragedy. The Buddhists don't believe birth is a good sign. They don't like human birth, you know? But to some, human birth is just a bridge. Excuse the additional noises, guys. It's the concepts that matter. What I'm trying to say is, when you look at the lifetime of the being, there's a sort of entrance into an individual existence. First, the body is born. In certain ancient cultures, they acknowledge there were two births. So some people would be like, what do you mean two births? You're born once, or how can you be born again? And this sort of birth was the sort of the birth of the independence of the origin of the mind. So as if your intelligence, who you are right now, you may culturally, socially look at the world and value the human being in a certain light. But you will see it's like your eyes are here when they could have not been. And that is valuable. That is valuable, that there's life here and we can see it. There is something to occur. You know, it's kind of like the hidden hope. Man looks beyond the stars and sees no God. There was this Russian astronaut, I think Yuri Gagarin, something like that. This man, he went there and he's like, I don't see any God up here. However, the design of human life is so incredible that it's as if there was something for existence to do. There was designs. For example, when I saw a tree having fruit, I was like, why? Why does a tree give fruit? It made no sense to me. And of course, you know, I was a young kid, very young kid when I wondered that way. But, you know, you begin to see the patterns underneath everything. So the second birth was the notion of the ego's birth. It's as if your physical existence, your physical wakefulness, if you go meditate in a cave for 3 months, 3 years, 3 months, and 3 days, as certain Tibetan practitioners do, you know what you will realize? You will just realize you are born. That is the kind of hilarious simplicity of the ultimate enlightenment. Some people feel that they think meditation is a sort of escapist route into an eternal freedom. You know, I feel like you can't run away from how your eyes are designing the world, and that is the issue. Now, before I get to that, I want to say this, that the Sufi tradition, the ancient Sufi Persian tradition, where we find certain people, unique poets arising from, by the name of Attar, Rumi, Hafez. These people were kind of like uh, next level poets. They did something for their time that was very odd. It's like it was like incredible, but it was odd. It was the concept of dying before you die. This concept of dying before you die was a sort of dismantling of the ideological individual conception, and it's not that it's chaos. I mean, anytime anything changes, there's a level of chaos alive and there's a level of order alive, and based on how your attention moves, you will find it. But some moments it's as if you can't outsmart nature. I'm not joking. You cannot you cannot outsmart a collective system. That is the liberating factor. The reason people are searching for freedom within is because they do not have it out in front of their eyes. And they don't even realize. For me, a part of I could say the heart of my soul has wept for all the spiritual people in the world. And there has been a part of my soul that has wept for all the people who think they are just physical only, purely. And in the middle of that weeping, I have even wept for myself. Because you see, your attention is the God of your thought. Your attention is your pure free will. Your free will is an attributeless translation of pure energetic intelligence into conceptual thought. It occurs very strangely. You don't realize, but the most important, it's as if we need the brain is the very important organ, but I am telling you, the human being's voice box is where thoughts come from. And I'm theorizing. You could say this is my hypothesis at this point. But I remember I sat very silent and still, and I started saying a sentence out loud, you know, and then slowly, slowly saying it slower, slower, slower. Eventually, when my mouth was pure, completely closed, my voice box was moving, and I noticed an instant similarity between thinking and saying something without having your mouth open. And that similarity made me kind of believe that it has to do with subtle movement. So just like how people wondered what is this atom? They kind of broke it up and they're like, oh my God, it's other particles we got to name. We are human beings. And what that means is there's a part of us that is just simply being, and there's a part of us that is in a complex way being human. And the effort of all the motivational communities I see so far online is that it's hope. You see, hope is the medicine of a dying world. But that hope can become blind because efficiency commands priority over just the right action. It's no longer a time where we need to know what the right things are to do. We need to do them properly. And the world can be way more freer. It's a show. Imagine like you go, like imagine you and your family right now. Imagine like as we're watching Friends, Okay, let's say this is like an never aired before Friends episode, which I'm kind of making up as a thought experiment here to prove a point. So in this episode, imagine we see that Ross and Rachel, maybe there is an episode like this, I don't know, but like Ross and Rachel enter like kind of Monica's place, and they see everybody has Venetian masks like Italy, and they're performing some Venetian kind of mask kind of dance. You see, in that moment, there requires to be a choice. There requires to be a choice to join the show and let the show go on, or in some sense, kinda all those friends sitting and being like, what are we doing wearing these masks? So it's an acknowledgement of a prior reality where in that reality there is freedom. Freedom doesn't just come because, you're running after it, you know? Freedom arises through a sort of karmic, I don't know, pretty sure this isn't a word, but deservance. What you deserve is how your mind has allowed the world to happen. Do you see? We are such complex beings, but so simply kept in a cosmic landscape. So, let me tell you, I'm kind of trying to build a bridge to the core of the title today, with the core of today's episode. You see, because when I say living many lifetimes in a momentary emotion, that has to do with an experience I've had. And it's a personal inner experience, so I can't just say it out there, because then it's kind of like as if you're running into the snow without a jacket. You got to paint the context first. So I want to give you a sense of kind of how I'm approaching this. Anyways, in ancient times, they acknowledged two births, two deaths. One birth was the birth of the objective self. The second one was the birth of the subjective self. The birth of the subjective self was based on the activity of the human being. What the base, in some sense, the objective self of the being just needs to exist. So, in some sense, your purpose in life is to, as I remember seeing this, I believe the man's name is Rick Rigsby. He said something incredible in his video on YouTube. He said, just keep standing, keep standing. As if not, it's as if when your physical body falls and fails, your mind keeps standing. And when your mind has, like your physical body, tried to remain till the last second and it suddenly begins to dismantle, then keep standing as your soul. For eternity remembered. That is the magnificence of eternal vision. That is where all the sacred poems and hymns went, that the divine will was in the eyes of man, and where man went was where man was in some sense meant to be. Nature, who was it? I think it was Lao Tzu, this Japanese philosopher from like 1,000 years ago. He said, sorry, not Japanese, Chinese. He was Confucius's mentor, Lao Tzu. Incredible person. He He said there are no accidents in nature, something of the sort. And he was this guy who would go for like 10 to 20 minutes in these silent walks in the mountain. Like the whole point, sometimes people would accompany him, but it was a silent walk. He was walking silently with the world that was there. So I'm trying to say that movement has become our physical life, and sound, the movement of sound, has become our subjective life. And trust me, people's thirst for knowledge has to do with their ability to communicate. Because let me tell you, in today's society, everybody wants to be smart. Because everybody wants to be smart, everybody is calculating. Because everybody's calculating, everybody is in competition. Because everybody is in competition, The world can't see itself. They only see the future they want, while the world gets torn apart because every person's like, I'm here once, hedonism, let me go party till the day I die, not realizing there was a species here. There was a species here that whatever you are as a being, you were present with it, but it was not efficient. It was not efficient because it was valuing certain systematic patterns and structures rather than the actual living being. That is the tragedy of the world, that the world doesn't see itself, but it's alive. So, the reason I said that two birth, two death idea is because your subjective sense of self becomes where your ability comes from. Your free will is something that you cannot do anything about, for it is the mover. It is realizing how your eyes are open and nature's magnificence is in the air, entering your eyes as the light of a new era. I believe humanity has to kind of break itself, but it doesn't have to break itself by we simulate. It's like, what is the mind doing? It looks at the moment, and in some sense, at the various animations of it come when the person's wondering or calculating something. So similarly, we simulate, we copy paste the current world, and we start living a parallel life. A parallel life where the animal is willing to be calm. So the energy of the wilderness of the being goes to their mind's potential. You see, there are no longer physical problems only in this world. There's so many subjective problems. The human being is not a machine, but the way they're designing society is only a machine can really succeed. And we see this. We see people who succeed. They are incredibly hardworking. They're so much working hard that it's as if it's like a sort of they feel like they are they're moving the gears of their careers, of their futures. It has to do with an elegance of atmosphere and how the story of the world enters the mind of the being. So keep these in mind, and I'm just going to share kind of that major experience that is the kind of point of this talk. You see, sometimes in my life, I've had certain moments where I've just been walking, and since childhood, I have been aware of thought. I have been aware of thought, strangely, because I have retained a memory before I spoke language. Before I learned language, I remember, and it's not just that, it's eventually you realize you are not your memories. Do you know how insane that is? I don't want to say insane. Do you know how incredible that is? Because you don't get defined by what you know you are not. If you know where your house is, somebody comes and says, hey man, you don't know where your house is. You will look at that person and be like, I know. You know that you know, full 100% moment of certainty. But there will come moments in this life where the uncertainty and the unknown approaches you. And my whole interpretation of divinity is that, trust me, divinity is like, you cannot study the whole universe, but you can study how the whole universe is being a moment for you. And so every person, I am saying this because the mind, exploration of the mind is more complex. I am approaching it as in a way where I think Carl Jung wanted to but couldn't for the time, because we needed his milestone. And what I mean by that is that Carl Jung was a person who wondered about the unconscious mind. He wondered how the person is being a person in that second life, the subjective life. And you know what he realized? He realized the mind is being influenced by tons of stuff. That's what he realized. And he began trying to somehow using the tools of a kind of geometrical vision to kind of shape the world. So remember I just had a moment where I just closed my eyes, and emotions for me personally, they come like winds. It's as if a wind hits me. When a wind hits me, it's like certain emotions I go through, it's like in that moment I can't do anything. I'm just being still in this kind of intense wind, emotional wind, as if my past is trying to disrupt or interrupt the present moment. One of those kind of situations. And so what I mean by that is that the mind is like a child. Trust me, there's a reason they called it the monkey mind. You gotta kind of, train your monkey mind up. You are training the attention to navigate beyond limitation. For what else is there to do? What else is there to do? This world is strangely like a stage where any performance can have value. But at the same time, why are the eyes of the species open? What have they not noticed yet that it would make every child, like as if, I am telling you, children are being born into this world and they're like, oh shit, suffering. There's so much suffering here. And so eventually, let us say in 1,000 years or less, there will come a civilization, a way that our species is standing. That the child will be born and I will look at the world and be like, I am back to work. The species lives on through the greatest efforts of each of its individual members. You cannot avoid it. You cannot avoid nature. It will pull you. It will like your emotions are, in some sense, in certain poets have said, are like God's fingers puppeteering the ego of man. What that means is the unknown is moving the known, and the known moves the unknown. But when the known moves the unknown, before witnessing how the unknown moves, it will be in an illusion, it will be in an artificial self-claim. So that's very crucial. Your relationship with your language dictates how your world is being compartmentalized, how it is being made into notions of meaning, and how you can wake up the mind of mankind. You can wake it up. And what that means is that the person realizes the self-reflective nature of the intelligence of the moment. And then there comes, how can I tell you, like you reach the same kind of scholars table as those in the old school of Athens. It is very important. This is a very important sentence that I feel I need to say. You see, mankind, our species, it has been intelligent enough to at least know what is, how can I say it, like, there must be an effort to unchain people from ideological future reward. Ideological future reward is kind of cluttering the efficiency of, the vision of the species. Pretty much a wind of a sort of unique emotional wind hit me in that moment. What I mean by that is I notice how the unknown is moving first before my known, my egoic construct kind of animates, and it is in a domain where the world is very flexible and can change. Behind your eyes, you can pay attention to many things. You can, believe it or not, just sit down, and the more you're still and silent, you just remember. Your mind becomes more, it's as if you see how much your mind is moving throughout the day if you suddenly were still and silent for a second. You know? Sometimes stress and depression or any sort of these kind of like, I don't know, the world's too tough to live in kind of mentalities. Let's just entertain this notion that in ancient Vedanta, like I think around like from ancient texts, like some say like 10,000 years ago in like, I don't know, ancient mythological India, the Upanishads were kind of, they came into motion through certain series of thought. And the reason they called them series of thought is because these were human beings who were in their own right, in alignment, in alignment with the unknown. Okay, so man, because he thinks everything has to be known, he denies himself the extrasensory. But what is extrasensory? Well, first you got to study language because it's all coming to a story, to a character in a story. Only when this character in the story is willing to move beyond its systems of belief is where new data appears, when new explorations and findings occur. A sort of vision came to me, and in that vision, I started having various thoughts, and these thoughts began speeding up. And when I say thoughts speeding up, it's kind of like imagine like a camera. Imagine like a camera and the camera guy's looking through the camera, okay? And let's say the director's looking through the camera, and everything that comes and passes, let's say the director is filming a highway, so every car that is coming and going is kind of like a movement of thought and awareness of man. And so what I'm trying to say is the movement became incredibly vast. I've had moments where I have gotten overwhelmed. You cannot touch the unknown too much. You cannot fantasize about the world too much and live in it. The world kind of will move you towards the ground. You see, it's as if it's not just that the earth has a gravitational pull, the planet, the celestial object has a gravitational pull. It is that the natural world has a gravitational pull for continuity and harmony and the authentic self. Sometimes I've been in nature and I'm like, imagine like the person sitting and a bird comes and the guy's looking at the bird and he's like, is this bird aware of my thoughts? Like scientists say, the brain gives waves. It's as if like the person having thoughts is like a unique wave and the person's wondering on in a subtle way, could the bird be aware of it? And the guy immediately finds out no, because the bird is not a bird. Life will forever, its truth will be a secret to the material world. You know why? Because it includes the emptiness, which is the edge of the veil of thought. You see, most people fear emptiness. For me, it's kind of like I mean, of course, Victor Hugo says nothing is more powerful than a thought that its time has come. As various thoughts began accelerating in my subtler planes of awareness and my attention, and my subjective reality began moving. It began moving faster than how my attention could remain just identifying with the physical construct. So you see, we are, of course, there's this profound kind of biological entity that we are being. Every person is like, like you could totally figure out evolution by just putting your hands on the ground and just for a second wondering. Pretty much it was kind of like an experience where I felt it was just like a wind of emotion was passing. So the moment came across as just one moment, as one moment of an experience of an emotion. But underlying, like behind that emotion, were all my memories moving at a speed where I instantaneously realized their detachment, my detachment. So, what I'm trying to say is, this is the incredible thing about life. We all think it's about us. That's the incredible thing. We think it's about us humanity. What are we doing here? But the reality is, what we think is us is codependent on the idea of the world. You have to, it's like your sense of self depends on the world you're in, it depends on the room you're in, it depends on the way you're standing. And life challenges the person, and there is a lot of theatrical existence, especially in dishonest societies. Incredible theatrical. Like it's kind of like, it's, trust me, it's like people don't just act in movies. The liar is being an incredible award-winning actor, you know? Because there's that awareness of what I am not, what is seen, and what is not seen. The thing is, it's like the species has evolved to a great position. We have all this technology. Overpopulation means we have a lot of potential groups. And what are we doing as a species? Building streets and roads, never questioning the ideological value of the planet. You see, the issue is Earth is neither heaven or hell, because what occurs on Earth is a sort of endless, infinite change. It's as if they ask the person, "Why did you sin?" And he's like, "Because that concept of a sin could be ascribed to that action." You know, the creator of the concept, in some sense, is responsible for the concept's kind of emergence or fate. I find it's like the whole purpose of language is to create a bridge between people's inner realities. And sometimes in life, moments can occur that take your attention more to your objective self, and there are moments that can occur that take your attention to your subjective self. When you become still and silent, just automatically you become aware of your subjective self. All those people were sitting there and they're like, oh my God, I have too many thoughts, I can't meditate. The dumb, excuse my language, but the irresponsible yoga instructor says, no, sit there until you have no thoughts. What a fool. What a foolish thing to say. No, the proper response is, okay, something is happening. Watch it. Continue watching it. Continue watching your moment until it can't lie to you. When I say watching, I mean observe the nature of how your intelligence is animating the moment. It's your mind right now. There's an incredible relationship with life that in a busy world we may never kind of remember, you know. So when I say living many lifetimes, I saw, it's as if, let me tell you this, a rock thrown in a pond has a ripple. What that means is you cannot envision a sense of self without a sort of context behind it. That context has to do with the primary ways the human being accepted language as reality, you know? It's like a kind of like a Rubik's Cube. I'm telling you, 2019 civilization is a problem to be solved. But its problem, the reason it's problematic has to do, one, with just the way the nature is. Like sometimes I think maybe our species is not that evolved. Maybe we shouldn't expect a great civilization. Maybe we're not that evolved as a species. And it's like, for how long can mistakes continue? Eventually, a mistake will be made so big that the world's going to be like, okay, you know, time to say bye to manifestation. So we have to have clarity, guiding, being a sort of spirit guide, a collective clarity, being the spirit kind of spirit guide of those in charge of the most important. We require voices to be heard because in those voices there are stories the world has never heard. This is why pretty much every friend of mine, I've given them either a notebook or I've definitely told them you gotta start writing because you gotta wonder about what is here, as if like it's like, imagine you're in a room, you know, let's say you're right now, it's like, what time is it right now? It's like close to 1 a.m. and I'm on my porch and it's like there's no light, you know. If there was a candle, I would look at that candle and be like, okay, there is a sort of awareness in the moment, a sort of light has been shown. The thing is, no, Galileo has this very incredible quote. He says, you cannot teach anyone anything, you can only make them realize it within themselves. And what he means is like, if no person trusts the other more than their self. So one thing the good guy and the evil guy had in common is that they trusted their eyes first, then the world, what the world was. You see, because trust me, it's like we went through an industrial revolution. Now our minds and behaviors are going through a sort of mechanical processing. You find your moment like an empty page. You watch the nature of the living world. And as you watch it, you stop wanting and not wanting. You stop having an idea. It's like instead of an egoic relationship with nature, it is a selfless relationship with nature. There's a man named Sadhguru. He said he went to this kind of this like, you know, he's aware. Sadhguru is a wise man, and he, in some sense, goes to this vegetable market in India, and he says he suddenly sees a person who was just shining and was bright. Like as if the guy had some next level aura of enlightenment to Sadhguru. And Sadhguru walks up to the guy and laughs and says, "Why are you selling vegetables?" And they both have a common moment of acknowledging sort of like the depth of their awareness of the world. And so eventually, in that Indian culture, they sit down and the guy tells Sadhguru his story. And this vegetable salesman gets some sort of illness and goes, and he wasn't that wealthy, so he goes into a very kind of bad hospital, and he goes into a health situation that's terrible. And he's every day he's wondering if he's gonna die or not. It's that kind of situation. And he was in that hospital for so long that he eventually realized the nature of himself. And one of those things where through your relationship with the nature of the world, there's an inner nature and an outer nature. It's like the free will, the ego was like, "I'm the king of the world." And suddenly there came a voice and it's like, "No, man, you're not the king." And the ego's like, "Why not? Who's above me?" And the free will looked in the mirror to discover it was the world. To be honest, as a character in a story, there's only two options. You're either going towards fullness and emptiness. Okay? When you see what hell is, hell, the Abrahamic notion of hell, I'm speaking about this in a sort of kind of linguistic context where we look at the notion. It's like hell is a place where the free will is limited. And then you see heaven. Heaven is where the free will is given pure access. So the way that this has come across many, it's a relationship with the known and the unknown. It's a relationship with the known and the unknown. And every culture kind of has made its own kind of, put its own uh, uh, concept over it. You know, it's as if some people acknowledge heaven and hell, Abrahamic religions. We have certain kind of traditional mystical context and kind of Eastern. How can I tell you? Like, there was only heaven and earth. There was no hell. It was just earth here, and then there was heaven. There was the higher ways that the mind could be. Because how far can language really take us? Eventually, it just comes down to stories leading to the implementation of efficient action. And once that's at 100%, what's there to do next? You eventually just watch. You watch life move in ways where you don't want to know how it moves all the time because it's sometimes the assumptions are hollow. You see, you gotta learn to realize that your eyes are a natural moment of sight. It's like some natural phenomenon. That's the cool thing. We have to, nature is so important. It's so important because without it, it's like it's our living history book. So, in that experience I was speaking about, the major experience underlying this talk. Just a moment occurred where I had an emotion and I was watching how that emotion was, how the unknown was kind of moving. You see, you don't think about your heart, it beats. So we say you automatically have mastery over certain involuntary biological processes. But what has mastery is the moment's presence. So the health of your moment. And it kind of broke my heart when I walked in downtown Toronto for the first time and I saw a man kind of shouting to himself. Like some would say he was a crazy person. And for me, I realized because it's a changing world, you cannot be too serious about who a person is because it has to do with their free will, right? So you can never really judge anyone because you don't have their eyes. But that person appeared to be communicating to in a world that was not visible to others. It was in the mind of that person. So that person had lost their mind because they were trapped in it. They lost the awareness that there's a mind there, there's a world here. Physical reality is as divine as non-physical reality. You know, it's kind of like a person complaining about life, let's say in the Abrahamic context, to God, like, God, why is there suffering? What is this? And God's like, yo, this is just a color on this canvas, you know? There's many different colors you can move. You have free will. Your attention can live many lives in one lifetime, and you tend to. That's the beautiful thing about the natural process, that we wake up and then we sleep. We wake up and we sleep, and we're kind of like the mind of the planet breathing between unconsciousness and consciousness. So eventually, the way you kind of see, there's a reason love is so crucial. And the word love nowadays, for many people, it's like they feel it's the gratification of their desires in a way that it's like there's no hassles. There's a quote, give me a second, let me find this. It's from Rumi, this incredible, of course I've introduced him in so many ways in my talk. He says, Rumi says, R-U-M-I, that's the poet. He says, your task is not to seek for love, but merely to seek and find all the barriers within yourself that you have built against it. What that means is you're not here to look for truth, you're here to seek and find all the ways that your inner reality is assuming how the world should be rather than how it actually is. And he says, seek and find all the barriers within yourself that you have built against it. So you see, I find you a kind of playful definition of divinity or a divine person. I personally consider this is I mean it's also validated by ancient traditions. Like you know, it's like I'm not the first to say it, but how would I explain it? It's like every thought you have ever had returns to one point of attention. And that one point of attention is it's just a moment of witnessing phenomena. That means the being has such an ability that they don't have to even be a thought. You know what that means? That means trust your eyes and the direct experience you're having. There is not just physical wars going on the planet, there's ideological wars. I say the wars of language. That means I was shocked to discover that every war that had occurred based on people's disagreement and political leaders' disagreement, it was because of the language, the concepts that the people communicated. You see? You have to release the resistance you have assumed with the world, or like some people who feel they're unlucky. I mean, why does that concept even exist for you? People think just because they hear something, they have to see that idea or be in that idea for their life. There's an that you might, guys, you might not kind of consider this, but I'm telling you, there are certain flows occurring on the surface of this planet. These flows cannot be ascribed, like that it makes, and there's no value to just ascribe it to some unknown divine agency. What it is the various value systems found within biological entities coming into a sort of contentment and agreement with what is the real value of the world. And you got to understand that, because I personally consider every person is an attributeless moment of being. You really can't, um, like they say, 99.9% of, like, I honestly have, how can I say it? Science for me is one of the greatest weapons that humanity could create against an unknown, kind of unknown world, unknown forces of the world. Science for me is like an incredible tool. However, sometimes when you get obsessed with using the tool, you don't use it properly. And it's as if the child hears from one angle, the world is purely this material place. Physical reality is superior than people's superstitious ideological frames. Okay? Now check this out. But when we go look at the atom, it's 99.9% of it is empty space. So it's like, I think there's a sort of, we have to realize the nature of the world is strangely like a dream, but it's a dream that has allowances for, how can I tell you, like your free will is eternity's way of remembering itself. I want to speak a little about the idea of treasure revealing. This idea, I'm bringing it up through a sort of Tibetan Buddhist context, where they had this sort of viewpoint where they were like these enlightenment kind of these. It's like there was a sort of treasure that was more valuable than physical treasure. Like there's a kind of treasure where Pirates of the Caribbean kind of like show type of treasure. And then there's a kind of treasure which has to do with the awareness. It's a treasure for your mind. It's not a treasure for your physical storyline. And the winds of evolution move us all. Every human being is living as a moment that is constantly changing. And if belief systems are born from simple moments they cannot be valid for the overall lifetime. So man's relationship with language shifts into a more simpler kind of observance of natural phenomena. We don't get too convinced by our interpretations of phenomenology on this planet, and we begin to watch, and soon come to the conclusion, I find, that shall we open doors for the future, or shall we close doors for the future? That's the next level of human life, a collective, efficient relationship with the world. The species has to realign itself conceptually, ideologically. The story of man is one, inaccurate, and two, lame. We just think we are meaningless kind of creatures here. How fascinating! As if like they give this artist like a paintbrush and a blank canvas, and they tell the guy, don't paint, there's no meaning to life, don't paint. And the artist says, this is the point in life, you create meaning through a free will that is in some sense riding the waves of uh, the universal sector, you know. We have to somehow, eventually it will happen. So I'm playfully trying to approach this. I feel every person should, that the evolution of the personality based on the environment that can be considered in one's abstract kind of like subtler planes of awareness. So you just like Ludwig Wittgenstein says, you realize the limits of my language are the limits of my world. But the only place that the limited has to go, that's only left for it, is the limitless. It's hilarious. It's like heaven. The idea of heaven will always be around. Doesn't matter if religion said it or not. Because the person thinks they're an individual, conscious, objective being. So where else do you have to go after that? After you are just, you know, the human being, what is left? So I find this is the spectacular thing that could never be shown in sci-fi movies, of what sci-fi societies, you know, for example, we can consider this viewpoint, you know, their philosophies would also be next level, not just their external technology, their inner technologies would be advanced. And the most advanced inner technology is a shift beyond language. So what this means is you learn that after you have been the greatest student of the world, the greatest teacher of the world will tell the greatest student of the world, okay, you learned everything. Now, the only place left to go is to learn from how your attention is being the self in every moment of your life. You have that sort of concentration, I will tell you, your biological purpose would free the imagination from its infinite burden to keep creating the world. This is why you have to acknowledge life as a sort of play of forms, a play of forces, a dance of various ways that intelligence is manifesting, you know? And this is kind of, this sort of attention, how it integrates into society is, this is the idea. If we are so strict as people, we evolve slow. If we are playful but also efficient and honest in the process, then I find like that member of humanity would have options. That means it's like, for me, it's like, wow, after, let's say, somehow all the governments of the world, they were like, okay, people, we realize how hard it is for you to work. This is why we will give you universal income. Imagine, just playfully imagine. After every person is financially, their suffering has ended, their financial suffering has ended, you suddenly begin to see, okay, what is left? And you see that you have to open people's minds because they are temporary. They're temporary, that's the thing. We're not here all the time, and maybe that's why things have a sort of value, a sort of scarcity. Somebody said, oh my God, the stars are falling. And somebody said the stars have already fallen in man's mind. It's very incredible. You will just naturally develop your own uh, intuitive style to life. You'll develop that when you actually observe what is here, and your relationship with what is simple in this life is important to observe, and your relationship with what is complex, because the world, it's like weather. For me, I'm like somewhat like an easy way to explain to a child what karma is. It's like your subjective weather. Okay. Every day there's a sort of new phenomena arrives to the person. And I find it's like we have 8 billion people. Pretty much these 8 billion people, if they had the efficient means of functioning at their most kind of efficient natural creativity, this is why certain sages said patience is the ultimate wisdom, because patience means the world moves and your eyes follow its incredible being. This is something that some people might find silly, but I personally have bowed to waterfalls. I remember I was like, when I went to Niagara Falls, I just sat in a park not even near the waterfall, and I closed my eyes, and I was just hearing the sound of the waterfall from the distance, and I'm like, wow, this waterfall, look at the presence of the sound of this part of nature. Eventually, through any sort of wonder for one's kind of, like Carl Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will dictate your life and you will call it fate. So when we wonder about how the conscious has a relationship with the unconscious, the universe is two eyes that see the same. It's a sort of multidimensionality and singularity being witnessed from an attributeless observance. This sort of empty seeing is I don't want to say it's kind of peaceful, like some say it's kind of like Satchit Ananda. That's a kind of Indian word for it. What it means is conscious existence is blissful. That means it leads to bliss. Your free will doesn't feel ignored. The spirit of your free will doesn't feel ignored by animalistic kind of programs of nature. and you find out that earth is in heaven. Someone said God is not out there, God is in man's mind. Then suddenly someone said, if God is in man's mind, who created man's mind? And so it all constantly, the cause and effect approach to our true origins will lead to fallacy. Sometimes the most wisest thing is to accept that there is not enough vision to move a certain direction. I've found moments where, as if like my egoic desire was like, run after that moment, like go into that reality of that moment. And then I've had my intuitive voice kind of shout, kind of scold. My conscience is my conscience does not appear to me as kind of like a simple voice. It appears as moments where the value of myself had not descended into despair. You see, that's the one interesting thing about life. When the child is born and when it's getting to the midpoint of its lifetime, that's when it's as if the creative intelligence is animating the stuff. But then there's a sort of, after the ascension, there's a descension, you know? And that descension is kind of like everything that was made into value, dear being. Learn to not let it go. Realize that the world changes so much that uh, how can we not be playful about it? How can we be certain about the true ideological position of a changing, universal sector? Like this is next. We are in a story that never existed before. That is humanity's value. There's this Tibetan Buddhist teacher named Sogyal Rinpoche. And Sogyal Rinpoche has this remarkable quote where he says, um, he has this remarkable quote where he says, until you conquer your anger, your enemies will be inexhaustible. Until your state of mind has learned to abide with a sort of freedom of the world. You see, people are either giving or taking. What else can be done? Giving, taking, or nothing. Giving, taking, nothing. That is kind of like the society's kind of gears, the furnaces of society. Eventually, I find that we will care for a sort of tourist approach to humanity. We're like, okay, wow, human beings are being born, they're living life in certain ways with certain possibilities, and eventually, they leave the system of manifestation that they have entered. I feel like sharing going into a Henry David Thoreau kind of quote tunnel. This is something I do. I've started doing in these recent episodes where I find some incredibly wise person's kind of quotes, and I just kind of share them with an audience. Why not? So here, let me read the guy's bio. Maybe the audience is gonna give a thumbs up. Henry David Thoreau was an American essayist, poet, and philosopher. A leading transcendentalist, Thoreau is best known for his book Walden, a reflection upon simple living in natural surroundings, and his essay Civil Disobedience, an argument for disobedience to an unjust state. Okay. So here, Henry David Thoreau says, go confidently in the direction of your dreams. Live the life you've imagined. He says dreams are the touchstones of our characters. Do not be too moral. You may cheat yourself out of much life. So aim above morality. Be not simply good. Be good for something. Henry David Thoreau says, rather than love, than money, than fame, give me truth. He says, the greatest compliment that was ever paid me was one when one asked me what I thought and attended to my answer. Oh man, yeah. Okay, let's carry on. He says, if you have built castles in the air, your work need not be lost. That is where they should be. Now put the foundations under them. Wow, this quote is so ahead of his time. He was so ahead of his time. Ridiculous. He says you must live in the present. Launch yourself on every wave. Find your eternity in each moment. Fools stand on their island of opportunities and look toward another land. There is no other land. There is no other life but this. He says the question is not what you look at, but what you see. He says nothing makes the earth seem so spacious as to have friends at a distance. They make the latitudes and longitudes. He says the only obligation which I have a right to assume is to do at any time what I think right. He says if one advances confidently in the direction of his dreams and endeavors to live the life which he has imagined, he will meet with a success unexpected in common hours. Wow, that's nice. He says, Henry David Thoreau says, I would rather sit on a pumpkin and have it all to myself than be crowded on a velvet cushion. Okay, I have no idea what he's saying. Books are the treasured wealth of the world and the fit inheritance of generations and nations. He says the cost of a thing is the amount of what I will call life, which is required to be exchanged for it immediately or in the long run. He says our truest life is when we are in dreams awake. Wow, 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 wow. Our truest life is when we are in dreams awake. Wow, 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 wow. Wow. He says, live in each season as it passes. Breathe the air, drink the drink, taste the fruit, and resign yourself to the influence of the earth. Henry David Thoreau says, disobedience is the true foundation of liberty. The obedient must be slaves. He says, if we will be quiet and ready enough, we shall find compensation in every disappointment. He says to affect the quality of the day, that is the highest of arts. And that sentence is one of my major points in this talk of where civilization needs to end. He says, what is the use of a house if you haven't got a tolerable planet to put it on? Wow. Wow. I think my respect for Henry David Thoreau is like went on, next level. So this man's eyes were open to ways that life could be, where freedom could be allowed and ability could be allowed before it was disallowed. It's just the person has to figure out who is holding the brush of their lifetime. What that means is the person living for themselves, or are they living for others? And my claim in these talks that the person is living for actually their truest self, which is their most efficient self in as a member of their species. So I'm saying your true self is how great your civilization advances. Pretty much it. It doesn't matter like what the details are. We want humanity to step boldly, as Dylan Thomas says, don't go gentle into that good night. Rage, rage, rage against the dying of the light. That means that is the ultimate task. That's one of the pillars of civilization. Where the world is not blind, because it could not, it never could be. Life is here. That's the profound thing. And so the next task is just we assemble as pilots of consciousness and navigate into the unknown. And each person, in some sense, in a global community shares the value of vision in a lifetime. For even though one moment can hold many lifetimes, many consciousness streams simultaneously active, many ways that language moves in the mind of man. But how man moves in an unknown world is this humility learning. Thanks for tuning in, guys. Much blessings and namaste.